Hi, my name is bbrophyb, and I'm a junior at Classical High School. And juniors at Classical are required to do a research project in order to graduate. My research project, it can be of our choice. I chose to do the topic of capitalism. So I did some analysis. I looked at some pros and cons, and from that I created a thesis that capitalism is not the most beneficial form of government, and it needs to be altered in order to be more efficient, and the current capitalist system is not great for a lot of people. For this research project, we had to do an applied learning, and so for my applied learning, I'm making this video and putting it on YouTube. I'm hopefully going to inform some of you about some things that you didn't know, and hopefully I can get some feedback. Appreciate it. If not, don't worry about it. So I'm just going to walk you through a couple of the basic ideas that I came across in research and some statistics, and yeah, hopefully it's good for you. There are four main reasons why I feel that capitalism is flawed and needs to be changed. First and foremost is the disparity of wealth in the country. There's such a great difference between the richest people and the poorest people. And this is highlighted in extreme examples, but also just overall. There's a lot of wealth clustered at the top, and a lot of people in poverty, and our middle class is smaller than it should be. Second of all, there's the agricultural and environmental impacts of capitalism. The idea of high consumer, high producer, high demand. So obviously the more you produce, the more waste you're going to excrete and hurt the environment. Third would be the cyclic nature of capitalism. The booms and the busts, the recessions and the growths, they can impact people in ways that a lot of people don't consider, and it's often the people that need the most help that get affected the most negatively by the recessions. And fourth would be our heavy reliance on foreign trade and finite natural resources. That is somewhat shocking when you hear the facts, and it seems like a very dangerous game to be playing with our international relations and foreign policy, as well as our reliance on primarily oil. I'll get right into it then. Disparity of wealth. I'll jump right to the most drastic example I can find, and it really is pretty shocking. You have Warren Buffett, who's the richest man alive. His net worth is $60 billion. Billion as in 9 zeros. Whereas you have almost 1 in every 10, it's about 8.9% of Americans who are unemployed. And that's pretty shocking. And another example would be Oprah Winfrey, who I recently found out has 7 beach houses, each one valued at over $1 million, whereas we have about 37.3 million people that are defined as living in poverty. If you think about that for a second, that'll blow your mind. I'm not trying to take anything away from these two. I'm sure they got their money some way, worked hard for it, manipulated the system for it, whatever they did to get ahead, all the power to them. But at the same time, you have people that are homeless, unemployed, in poverty, living paycheck to paycheck. And it's not because they're lazy, it's because there just isn't enough opportunity, there's enough jobs because of the system, the way that the wealth is clustered at the top and then trickles down. That's just the simple facts, and it's kind of startling. One of the first statistics that I came across when I was researching the disparity of wealth in America was the Gini coefficient, or the Gini coefficient maybe, which is basically a ratio of distribution of wealth in a country, and the lower your Gini coefficient ratio is, the more equal things are, the bigger the middle class, whereas the higher would be the more disparity, with clusters at the top and the bottom extremes. And the Gini coefficient for most of the European Union countries and Switzerland and Norway and things like this, as well as Canada, are in the high 20s, the high 20% to about 30%. And of course, the developing countries in Africa, such as like Namibia and such, that is usually hovers around 70, which is obviously not favorable. And the U.S. is the highest of any of the modern economic superpowers. Capitalists, go get them. Latest number came in at about 47, which is not nearly 70, but it's much higher than our European counterparts, and so that shows that we're already pushing farther and farther away from where we want to be. Okay, I'll move on to the environmental impacts then. Capitalism is an economic system based largely on supply and demand, new innovations, increased productivity. All these things contribute directly to making more stuff, consuming more stuff, thinking of new stuff to make. And all the stuff that's being made, there's being things put into it and things being let out. And of course, as our society has become more and more driven by consumption, our waste has increased as well. Factories, the smog, the pollution, offshore drilling for oil with global warming, just overall a lot more waste let onto the environment through pollution and rupturing ice caps, rising water levels, CO2 emissions. The heavily consumer society drives these up more so than one that would not put as much emphasis on innovation and new products and increased efficiency in manufacturing. So, I mean, on the one hand, I love my cell phone, love my iPod, love my junk food, but on the other hand, every time you see that the newest cell phone brand and how there's 55 billion to choose from, and that's well and good, choice is good, but if there were 5 to choose from and we could cut back that waste by 500%, that could be just as practical. You could have 5 really well designed cell phones and reduce the waste a lot, and that's just not how the capitalist system works. And I think there's a flaw in that inherent to harming the environment. I'll move on to the cyclic nature of capitalism, which is the recessions and the growths and the booms and the busts. And most economists will tell you that are advocating capitalism will tell you that it's not a big deal. It's just happens every once in a while. It's a regular part of the flow. Capitalism will this and that. Well, I just don't think that's acceptable, because if you think about it, the recessions inherently favor those that are wealthy, like most things in the capitalist system. If you're making millions of dollars a year, or if you're even making $100,000 a year, then if you get, you head into a recession, you might get cut back, but you're going to be fine. You're going to be able to, maybe you'll go out to eat a couple fewer times a week, but, in general, you're not going to suffer so much. Whereas, think about that 37.3 million people, over 10% of our population, that's in poverty already. What if this latest recession is just the final straw on the camel's back, the final straw that breaks the camel's back, rather, and sends them plummeting, can't pay for their house, can't pay for their heating or electricity, water. I mean, think about it. If you're living that on the edge, and this is with a relatively loose standard of poverty, there are many more people that are really living in impoverished conditions, although they may not be considered technically in poverty. The next recession, although it may just be part of the system and it'll go away eventually, could be particularly crippling and could send you into that downward spiral that you can't bounce back from, like the rich can. And let's face the facts that these recessions happen with surprising and concerning regularity, about once every 10 years or so, pretty consistently since the Panic of 1797. The shortest of which has been about 6 months, and the longest, of course, the Great Depression, which lasted 43 months. And so if you think about it, that's just far too frequent, far too long-lasting, and it's just unacceptable. Finally, I'd like to talk about the foreign trade and the finite natural resources. These are things that we rely heavily on in our capitalist system. I'll just throw out some stats quickly with United States relations with China. Last